Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make Napoleons, and this is what it looks like. It has 3 layers of a crisp and flaky puff pastry, and in between we have a delicious pastry cream. And the finishing touch is a dusting of powdered sugar. So we are going to start with our puff pastry. You will need 9 ounces, which is 250 grams. You could use a store-bought puff pastry. I'm using my homemade Blitz puff pastry, which is really like a rough puff. It's not your classic puff, it's easier to make. And the great thing about homemade puff pastry is you can make it ahead of time and then just freeze it. You can freeze it for about a month, and then like the night before you want to make Napoleons or anything else with puff pastry, just take it out of the freezer and put it into the refrigerator and let it defrost overnight, and then you're ready. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll our puff pastry into a square. We want to make it a little more than 10 inches square, 25 centimeters, because we are going to trim the edges. So you will need a ruler. It's nice to have a ruler, just a kitchen ruler. You only use it for your baking, nothing else. Put it in your drawer. Don't let the kids have it. So that's the top. And like any pastry, when you're rolling it, pick it up. And then if you need to add more flour, if you need to flour your rolling pin, just do that. 1, so it doesn't stick, and 2, that way if it needs to kind of shrink back, like you're pushing, so let it shrink back a bit. Okay, so that looks good. I forgot to say, but you can go to the joybaking.com website or our YouTube channel, and you will find a recipe along with the video on how to make your homemade Blitz puff pastry. Can't forget to tell you that. So now, I'm using my ruler. I'm a little more than 10 inches, 25 centimeters. So now we're going to trim the edges. That way when our puff pastry bakes, even the ends will kind of puff up and you'll see all the layers. If you don't trim, then you won't see that. Pizza wheel, a knife. Now, if you want a straight edge, you can just use your ruler. Put it down, trim your edges. And while I'm doing that, you will need a baking sheet. I've lined mine with parchment paper. You could just, spray it or even oil it if you want. And then we are going to have to, I'm just going to eyeball that, it's pretty straight. We are going to have to chill this every time, especially with puff. We want it really cold and firm. I'm just going to transfer this onto there. You want it really cold and firm. We want it to put it in the refrigerator so it relax and get cold and firm, so that will kind of minimize the shrinkage when it bakes. Now, I'm going to say you're going to have to put this in the refrigerator at least an hour and then check to make sure it's firm. You could actually do this step even the day before, and let it chill overnight. So now what we're going to do is prick our puff pastry. If you have a fancy like pastry docker, it's called, of course, probably don't. So you can just use a fork, but this is kind of fancy too. It just runs like this. That way the puff will get more even baking when you dock it like this or prick it. And so that's all we have to do for that. I'm just going to cover it with plastic wrap, and like I said, chill it until it's really cold and firm, and then we're going to bake it off. So when it's nice and cold and firm, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. So now, puff pastry, nice and cold. So we are ready to bake it off. Now normally, when you bake puff pastry, you would just take your baking sheet and put it into the oven. And then what happens is your puff, as it bakes, puffs up, and you get really quite tall. We're going to do it a little different because, as you can see here, my layers are pretty thin. And if you ever go to a French pastry, that's typically the way the Napoleon looks. It doesn't like really high layers. It's more like a cookie, very crisp, flaky. And how you do that is, take your pan, you put another piece of parchment over there, and then you take 2 baking sheets and put it right on top. And that weighs it down. And that way, it'll bake, but it won't puff up. And as you can see here, through that, it's kind of hard. We want to bake this until it's golden brown. And that way it'd be nice and crisp and flaky. So good. So what you're going to do is bake it, I would say 40 to 45 minutes. Rotate your baking sheet front to back about halfway through to get even baking. You know, depending on, everyone's oven is a little different. You could check it like maybe at 35 minutes and just, you know, see how it's doing. But I find typically it's about 40 to 45 minutes. So while our puff pastry is baking, we'll make our pastry cream. But actually, you can even do your pastry cream ahead of time, and you can chill it in the refrigerator for actually a couple days. So what you will need is a saucepan and 1 cup, 240 milliliters, 240 grams. I'm using whole milk, which is full fat milk. I'm sure people are going to ask, could you use a reduced fat? You could use a reduced fat. I wouldn't use a skim milk. I mean, pastry cream is supposed to be rich. You want that flavor of the fat. So, you know, I think a 2% would be fine. I wouldn't go with skim. So just put that in there, along with just a pinch of salt. And then we're going to need 1/4 cup, which is 50 grams of granulated white sugar. I'm just going to put like maybe about half of my sugar. I'm just going to eyeball. It's not critical. Just put that in there. And I'm going to, because I don't have a vanilla bean, but I'm going to use vanilla extract. But if you have a vanilla bean, you could flavor, because we're doing a pastry cream vanilla flavored, you could take a vanilla bean, split it down, and put it in and heat it up with your milk. But since I don't, I'm using vanilla extract. So we're going to put that over medium-high heat, and I'm going to use this, and bring it just to a boil. It will just start to foam up. Be very careful, because once it starts, it can overflow very quickly, that foam. So don't walk away. And while that's happening, what we're going to do is take the remainder of our sugar, along with 2 tablespoons, 15 grams of cornstarch, because the cornstarch is going to thicken our pastry cream. And I'm just going to use a whisk, mix that together, and then I'm going to add 3 large egg yolks, which is about 51 grams. And have your egg yolks at room temperature. Of course, the egg yolks, we're only using the egg yolks because, again, we want a rich, flavored pastry cream, which is so good with the puff. And then right away stir this. Otherwise, you start to get like a crust on the yolks, which we don't want. Okay. And I'm just going to wait till that comes up to a boil. Okay, so we are starting to foam up. So grab that. And now I'm going to whisk constantly as I gradually, I'm just going to put a little in. This is called tempering. That way the egg and then the milk will be at the same temperature, and then I can whisk in a little quicker. all that mixed in. And now we are going to cook it. So just pour it back in here. If you found there was some lumps, then you could strain it first. If that egg did cook a little, which sometimes can happen, don't worry, just strain it and get rid of it. So now what we're going to do is I'm just going to have this on medium heat. Bring it up to a boil. You want to stir it constantly right now. So I'm using a heat-proof wire whisk. You could use a heat-proof spatula. You could use a wooden spoon. And you will need a timer, because once this comes up to a boil, we are going to cook it for 2 minutes. And that way the cornstarch will be activated and it will thicken our mixture. And then also you want to cook out. Okay, so I'm going to put my timer on. It's starting to, when it starts, you see bubbles, turn your heat down. You want a boil, but not like too vigorous. And just, you're going to have to whisk the whole time. And that way, we're going to cook the cornstarch, it'll thicken. You won't have a cornstarch taste. Okay, so it's nice and thick, about to go off. So my timer, so I'll take it off the heat and we'll stir. So now, like I said, if you used a vanilla bean, then you don't need to do this, but I didn't. So I'm going to add a half a teaspoon, 2 grams. I'm actually using a vanilla bean paste, but you could use just a pure vanilla extract. What I like about the vanilla bean paste is thicker than a vanilla extract. Plus, it has the seeds from the vanilla bean. So it's like a cheat. You know, you'll have the look of the seeds, but you didn't use a vanilla bean. Okay, and just whisk that in. Oh, just really smell that. So now what I have here is I just took a baking sheet and lined it with plastic wrap. I'm going to spread my pastry cream on that because we have to chill it. You could just put it in a bowl, but the reason I'm doing this is I can get a thinner layer and it will chill down faster. Because what we need is this to become firm, and we want it to chill down to about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 21°C. And the reason we're going to do that is we're not actually just using pastry cream. We're going to make what is called a mousseline cream. And really what that is pastry cream with butter whipped in or beaten in. Because a lot of times when you make pastry cream, so once you have that, immediately cover it with plastic wrap, because otherwise you'll get a skin forming on the top. Likewise, if you want to pour it in a bowl, press your plastic wrap right down onto the top of your pastry cream. So there. So what I was saying, pastry cream. A lot of times you make pastry cream and you take it off the stove and you actually put in some melted butter, and that enriches it, makes it taste better. But we're going to do a little different. We made our pastry cream and then we're going to add the butter. Again, your butter will need to be at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 21°C. So what I do is I make my pastry cream. I'm going to put this into the fridge to chill it down, or you could put it, if you had it in a bowl, you could put it on ice, but I'm going to put it in the fridge. And then at the same time I take my butter, cold butter, out of the fridge, and you will need 6 tablespoons, which is 85 grams of, I'm using unsalted butter, and then I just I cut it up into smaller pieces and cover it with plastic, and then that'll sit out on my counter and come up to room temperature. Now, if you want to make a really good mousseline cream, use the European style unsalted butter, which means it has a higher butterfat content, which means it'll taste even better, which I'm using. Hey, these are special. This is not an everyday thing this is a special treat, Napoleons. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to continue baking my puff, and then we'll come back. Okay. Okay, let's see. Just take your off. And there we have it. Beautiful golden brown. So that's what you're looking for. Like I said, the time, just kind of use that as a guide. And now what I'm going to do is just gently with my, put it over here. And I'm going to let that cool down completely to room temperature. And then what we're going to do is cut it so we can make our little individual Napoleons. So now, our puff pastry is cooled down. We are ready to cut it into the strips. So you will need your ruler and a serrated knife. I did already trim 3 of the edges, but I'll show you you just want to even them up. And then, whichever way you want to go, just measure your puff, whatever it is. Mine's about 9 inches, is 23 centimeters. So whatever it is, whether it shrunk more, whether it didn't shrink as much, and then you want to divide that into thirds. So for me, that, because it's 9 inches, I'll go 3 inches, which is 7.5 centimeters, which I've already notched ahead of time. And then I'm just going to take again and cut. It's not that critical because we're making individual ones, so if some are not, we're not selling these, so if some aren't the right exact same size, don't worry about it. And then, but don't forget to keep all the little, these are really good to snack on. And then what I'm going to do is just each strip I'm going to divide into 6 pieces. So I'll get my ruler out and I'll figure that out and cut them. So now I did cut all of my puff pastry. So we're going to make 6 Napoleons. So we have 18 little rectangles. And so what you want to do is take a baking sheet. Each Napoleon, as you know, has 3 layers. So we're going to pipe our mousseline cream on 2 of them. And then you have the top layer, which we then dust with some powdered sugar. So I have 2 layers like that, 2 of them. And that's where I'll pipe my cream. So now for our mousseline, which I said is pastry cream, where we're going to beat in some butter. And the reason we do it this way is the butter will firm up the pastry cream, so therefore we can pipe it. Like a lot of times, like I said, you add the pastry cream at the end, or the butter at the end, and then it's hard to pipe that. So that's why we're doing it this way. So just, like I said, you want your pastry cream at room temperature, well, about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 21°C. Just put that right in there. And I'm going to beat it on medium speed until it gets nice and smooth. We don't want any little lumps in there, so. And that'll warm it up a little too if yours is not quite warm enough. So what you want is that, like I said, your pastry cream to be really smooth, no little lumps. If there's any lumps, the biggest hazard with mousseline cream is if it wasn't warm enough, you're going to get, your cream will almost look curdled. And so if you're, say, pastry cream, you can't get it smooth enough, it's probably too cold. Couple things you could do. You could take a bowl of hot water and just put this right in there for a few minutes to warm it up, or you could pop it in the microwave. Mine, I did. It's nice and smooth. So now I can start adding my butter. Again, you want your butter at least 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 21°C. I did cut it into pieces because I'm going to add like a few. So I'm going to just show you. See, I can flatten down my butter. That's kind of how you want it. If you don't have a thermometer, that's how you can test without having a thermometer. So what I'm going to do, beat this on medium speed till it's incorporated. It's nice and smooth, and then I'll just keep adding the butter until I've added it all and it's really nice and smooth and creamy. Okay, I'm done. I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. Temperature for this type of cream is really important because mine actually, I was beating in that butter and it started to look kind of curdled. So I did just take my whole bowl and I put it in the microwave because I did use, if you happen to have, I have like an infrared thermometer and I used it and I was not at 70, I was below that. So I just popped it into the microwave for like 10 seconds to warm it up. Actually, I warmed it up to over 70. And you will notice if you do that, so if yours curdles, don't panic. You know your mousseline cream is just too cold. That is the problem. So don't panic. Either, like I said, if you don't have a microwave, you can just microwave, put it in 5-10 seconds, not too long, and then check it and beat it a little more. Or you can take a large bowl, fill it with hot water, and then just submerge this in. Now, I meant to say, I used my electric stand mixer with the paddle attachment to make this. You could use like a hand mixer, or really, you can just use a wire whisk. So this is what your cream is going to look like, nice and smooth. So now we are going to pipe it. So what I have here is I'm just using a plain tip, about a 1/2 inch, which is, what is that, about a centimeter? Yeah, just a little over a centimeter. And then in a piping bag. Now when I put my tip in like that, and then what I do is just twist it and kind of stick it in there. And that way when I fill the bag, it doesn't start all coming out the other end. And then I'm just going to put that into a glass, then I can just put it in. A little trick. Some people can hold the pastry bag in one hand and pour their stuff in, but for those of us that aren't as good, we use the glass. So Napoleons, a little bit of work. It's not something you make like every day for a quick. It's a special occasion, but wow, people will love them. And the thing is, I made 6, and you may say those are a little smaller than what you normally see. Yes, they are. But you know what? I think 3 layers of puff with all that cream, that's like the perfect size for one individual. Otherwise, you make those big ones, you gotta, it's a little, I find it a little too much. But you can make them as big or as small as you want. But this is the size I like. So I'm just gonna put that down. Open your bag up, try to get the air out, and just push it down. So once you get it, then one hand, let's twist your bag. And so I'm using this hand as a guide and this hand. So what I'm going to just pipe little rounds. I'm going to do 2 rows of 4. So that's what you want. Sorry, that's the dog. And just do another one. So I'm just going to do all of these. Okay, just about finished. Okay, there we go. So now that cream is a little soft, and so we don't want to stack them yet. So what I'm going to do is just take my whole baking sheet, put it into the refrigerator until that cream becomes firm. I would say, 15 to 30 minutes, somewhere around there. And then when we come back, we will stack them and finish them off. Okay, so we are almost there. So now we have our pastry cream, or mousseline cream. It's chilled. So I'm going to take, I'll just do it here. So I have one, take this one, top, and then just kind of even it up. You can just press down very lightly, and then take one of the last pieces and put it on top like so, gently press down. And then, I just love the look of a Napoleon. And then I like to, as you can see here, I like strips like that. So what I do is just take a little bit of wax paper, I just parchment paper, and put it like that. I'll do two, however you want. Then I got some powdered sugar in a strainer or sifter, whatever. And I like lots. Be generous, like so. And take off the strips. Pretty cool, hey? And there's your Napoleon. A lot of people like raspberries or strawberries with their Napoleons. Some people actually put berries inside. Sometimes what you could do is maybe put I think would look pretty cool, and add some color. Put a raspberry on the part that isn't with the powdered sugar. That would kind of be very bold looking. So some people, like their Napoleons freshly made. That way the puff pastry is really crisp, and they like to eat it. Personally, I like to make mine a little ahead of time because I find them really hard to eat when that puff pastry is really crisp. So I'm going to, these I actually made yesterday. Now, Napoleons, once you assemble them, typically not much more than a day in the refrigerator, because after that, that cream really starts to soften that puff. But up to a day, I think is fine. So I made these, like I said, yesterday. So when you cut, I don't want to eat that whole thing. So when you cut a Napoleon, typically they put it over that way. Actually, I've seen in French bakeries, they serve it like that and actually put some more either whipped cream or even more mousseline cream piped on top, and then put some berries, because it kind of looks cool that way too. But if you want to cut it, take your serrated knife, and I find it much easier to cut it. It would be very hard to cut the freshly put together one. I lost a little bit of cream. And then I know this seems like a little baking project when you make Napoleons, but I'll tell you, it is well worth the effort, every bit. These are just so good. You have that crisp and buttery and flaky puff pastry. Combine that with the pastry cream mixed with some butter. It's so rich tasting, not overly sweet, very creamy and smooth. And then, I like the little extra sugar on top. These are just so good. If you want to impress someone, make them Napoleons. So you must try these. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com.